This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We're broadcasting on over 700 stations on Pacifica and NPR and low-power FM and college and community radio stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations, and on both TV satellite networks, on Dish Network Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and on DirecTV Channel 375. And we're video-audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our transcripts are also there, and you can get our headlines in Spanish, and any radio station can take the audio version of the Spanish headlines, as over 200 are. Juan?
Well, NATO has denied a report in the French newspaper Le Monde that 10 French soldiers killed in Afghanistan earlier this week died as a result of friendly fire from Allied planes. A NATO spokeswoman said Thursday that Le Monde's claims were, quote, completely unfounded. The Le Monde report had quoted French soldiers who had survived the Taliban ambush. The soldiers told the newspaper that NATO planes arrived 4 hours after the ambush and accidentally hit French troops. French President Nicolas Sarkozy visited survivors in Kabul earlier this week and vowed to continue the fight against terrorism. He said no regrets about the sending of 700 additional troops to Afghanistan despite the soldiers' deaths. At a memorial service in France Thursday, Sarkozy justified maintaining the French presence in Afghanistan.
Nous n'avons pas le droit de renoncer à défendre nos valeurs.
We do not have the right to give up on our values. We do not have the right to let the barbarians triumph, because a defeat at the other end of the world will be paid by defeat here on the territory of the French Republic.
Sur le territoire de la République française.
We're joined now from Burbank, California, by Sonali Kolhatkar. She's the host of Uprising on Pacifica radio station KPFK and co-author of Bleeding Afghanistan, Washington Warlords and the Propaganda of Silence. She's also co-director of the Afghan Women's Mission, a group that works in solidarity with Afghans to help improve health and educational facilities for Afghan refugees in Pakistan. Sonali Kolhatkar, welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy and Juan.
The situation right now in Afghanistan.
Well, it's getting worse in a nutshell. Basically, if you want to look at how things have changed over the past few years, you can simply look at how the Afghan people themselves have changed their minds about the U.S. occupation. Just in 2005, there was almost a 70% approval rating of the U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan, because Afghans thought maybe things would get better if the foreign troops were present and they could be a buffer to the fundamentalist forces. In 2007, just a year ago, that approval rating was down to 40%, and I believe it's probably a lot lower right now. I mean, basically what's happening is Afghan people are caught between a variety of forces, ordinary Afghans. They're caught on the one hand between the forces of the Taliban, who are increasing in number and strength. If you just look at the way in which they launched these recent attacks against the French, at the same time they had a series of suicide bombers going to attack a U.S. base in a geographically separate location. This means they can launch, simultaneous attacks at the same time in different areas. This means they're very strong. And of course, U.S. and NATO forces are attacking, and they're killing civilians. So far, 2,500 people have been killed in Afghanistan since January, about half of them civilians. So Afghan people are feeling the brunt of that very seriously, because attacks against forces are up and attacks from forces are up. So the violence is really escalating. Then on the other hand, you have this other aspect that's rarely covered by the U.S. media, certainly never mentioned by government officials here, which is that the Afghan central government, created and installed essentially by the United States, is really devastating the people of Afghanistan. There's rampant corruption. They're sucking away the aid. They're completely oppressing people. They're attacking journalists. Women are being imprisoned in greater numbers than ever before for the crime of escaping from home or having quote-unquote sexual relations, illegal sexual relations. Most of these women are simply victims of rape. And so you have all of these forces that are converging upon the Afghan people from different directions, and life for the average ordinary Afghan has gone from bad to so much worse in a very short period of time.
One of the things that the Bush administration repeatedly pointed to was the supposed liberation of the women of Afghanistan as a result of the U.S. Invasion and the replacement of the Taliban. What is your sense of what is actually going on at the grassroots level with women in Afghanistan?
Well, there's several aspects to it. You know, on the one hand, you have to look at how Afghan women are affected on a day-to-day level. Day-to-day level, of course, they're suffering the terrible effects of grinding poverty. There's hardly, you know, food and water and employment. Only 10% of Afghans have electricity. So Afghan women are suffering the same thing that all Afghans are suffering in terms of poverty and all of the things that go along with that. On top of that, of course, they face increasing fundamentalist forces from the government and from the insurgency, quote unquote, the Taliban, in terms of repressive Islamist type decrees. You know, they have to increasingly worry about Sharia law, or strict interpretations rather of Sharia law. And then they face a very fundamentalist judiciary that was installed by our puppet president Hamid Karzai. And then politically, Afghan women enjoy political equality with men in their constitution. It's enshrined in the new constitution, which is, of course, a wonderful thing, but the constitution is just a piece of paper. If you look at what happens on the ground, politically speaking, women who are in parliament, if they speak up, are completely attacked. And the best example of that is a woman I know that has been interviewed on Democracy Now! Before, Malalai Joya, the young social worker from Farah province, who has very bravely spoken out against warlordism in the parliament and, has really been the voice of the people for speaking out. She has been banned from parliament and is yet to be reinstated. She faces an Islamic court, and that's the price that women pay politically for speaking out. It's okay for women to be in government as long as they shut up and stay quiet, but if they exercise their rights, they get attacked. I mean, that's basically what women are facing in Afghanistan. Not that much better than what they were facing under the Taliban. Certainly, they can legally wear whatever they want to wear, but oppression and freedom is a lot more about wearing or not being able to wear a burqa.
Sonali Kolhatkar, the resignation of the General Pervez Musharraf, the president of Pakistan. Pakistan has long been funding through its ISI, the intelligence services, and actually from U.S. money. Billions have been lost. But working with the Taliban, can you talk about that relationship and the significance of the resignation of Musharraf?
Well, Musharraf's resignation is interesting because it basically, I think, is a symbol, it's a symptom of how untenable the situation has become. And the relationship between, of course, Pakistan and Afghanistan is one significant part of why Musharraf resigned. His government and its support for, and the ISI's support for the Taliban over the years has become something that is pretty much intolerable, both at home, but also by the U.S. government. And really what's happening in terms of, if you're looking at Afghanistan, is the Taliban are able to organize simply by crossing the border into Pakistan. And you can't fight an insurgency if they're free to go and organize and recruit and do whatever they need to do. In fact, of course, you can't really fight an insurgency with pure military power anyway, but that's another story. And so where Pakistan is concerned, I think the main significance of Musharraf resigning is it now opens up a political vacuum in Pakistan where the Pakistani government has to decide what to do about the problem of the Taliban. Do they want the Taliban to be, to have an organizing base in their country, which of course increases the instability in Pakistan itself and certainly worsens the situation in Afghanistan? It's up to Pakistan to crack down on its borders if they want to. It's up to Pakistan to decide what to do with the Taliban, but it's also more complex than that. The Taliban are Pashtun people. A lot of Pakistanis are Pashtun. The Pashtun population was cut in half by the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan on purpose to destabilize that region, of course, if you go back in history. And so you can't really separate the Taliban from Pakistan either. It's a problem that I'm not sure has a clear answer, but really it's up to the new Pakistani government to decide what to do with the mess that essentially Musharraf created. Also, of course, Musharraf has been Washington's man, so they really have to decide what to do now in the vacuum left behind by him.
The heroin trade, it's been exploding since the occupation of Afghanistan. Why, in your sense, is thousands of foreign troops in Afghanistan, yet the trade continues to explode in size?
Well, you have to go back and see what has happened over the past several years. When the Taliban were defeated in late 2001, the United States and the UN at the time, which was then replaced by NATO, had an opportunity to, make things right, if you will, in terms of what was happening on the ground, in terms of poppy production, because the Taliban had done a good job for them. The Taliban had already banned opium production, and if the U.S. had gone from that point onwards in terms of giving farmers an alternative to poppy production, an alternative that could feed their